Mom, why do you always do this? Lorenzo didn't look up from his laptop. I was still holding the box. Tamales, his favorite since he was 9 years old. I'd been up since 5 that morning wrapping them in corn husks the way his grandmother taught me, drove 2 hours from my apartment in San Antonio to their house in Austin. Both hands full, burns on my fingers from the steamer. He still didn't look up. My name is Lilly Baker, 62 years old, 31 years carrying mail through Chicago winters that could split your skin open. I transferred to San Antonio after Daniel died because the cold started feeling personal. Widow, mother, and until that Saturday afternoon standing in Sophia's spotless kitchen, I thought I was still welcome here. I set the box down on the marble counter. My marble counter. My down payment, my signature on the mortgage papers. Lorenzo finally looked up. Not at me, at Sophia. Daniel died on a Wednesday morning. Lung cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to gone. Lorenzo was 16, I was 44, and the night we came home from the hospital, the house so quiet it felt like the walls were holding their breath, Lorenzo sat on the kitchen floor and cried until he couldn't make sound anymore. I sat down next to him on the cold linoleum, didn't say anything, just put my arm around him and stayed there until 2 a.m. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were swollen nearly shut. "What are we gonna do, Mom?" I pulled him closer. "We're going to be okay," I told him. "I promise you that." I meant every word. The post office doesn't care that your husband just died. Monday morning, I was back in my uniform, bag on my shoulder, route to walk. I didn't ask for sympathy, and my supervisor, God bless him, didn't offer any, just nodded when he saw me clock in and handed me my sorted mail. That was fine. I needed the structure. Daniel left behind a small life insurance policy, enough to cover the funeral and 4 months of bills. After that, it was just me, my salary, and a list of expenses that never got shorter. Lorenzo wanted to play baseball in high school. I paid for the equipment. He wanted to attend a college prep program junior year. I took on holiday overtime. When his senior class went to Washington, D.C., I worked 6 consecutive Sundays so he could go. He sent me a photo from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. I still have it in my wallet. University of Texas accepted him his senior year, full application, no scholarship. Tuition, housing, meal plan. I looked at the number and felt my stomach drop. Then I looked at his face when he opened the letter. I took out a personal loan the following morning. 4 years later, I stood in the blazing Austin heat watching him cross that stage in his cap and gown. He found me afterward in the crowd, grabbed me in a hug so tight I lost my breath. "I couldn't have done this without you, Mom." I believed him. I should have written it down, kept it as evidence, because 4 years after that, standing in his kitchen holding a box of tamales with burned fingers, that man didn't exist anymore. Sophia walked in from the living room. She looked at the box on her counter, then at me. Then she did that thing she always does, that slow smile that starts at her mouth and never reaches anywhere else. "Lilly." "Not Mom. It stopped being Mom around year 2. You really didn't have to do that." Her voice was the kind of polite that's actually a door closing. "I wanted to," I said. "It's his favorite." She glanced at Lorenzo. Something passed between them, quick, practiced, the kind of look married people develop when they've had a conversation about you that you weren't invited to. Lorenzo cleared his throat. "Mom," he closed the laptop slowly. "We've talked about this." "Talked about tamales?" "About showing up." The kitchen went quiet. I heard the television in the next room. Mia and Cole were watching cartoons. My grandchildren, 7 and 5 years old. I'd driven 2 hours with burned fingers to see them too. "I called ahead," I said. "You said it was fine." I said, "Sure, that's not the same as fine." Sophia busied herself at the sink, wasn't fooling anyone. I looked at my son, really looked at him, the set of his jaw, The way he wouldn't hold eye contact, the expensive watch on his wrist that I'd never seen before. Something in my chest went quiet in a way I didn't have words for yet. "I'll just say hi to the kids," I said softly. "Then I'll go." Lorenzo opened his laptop again. "Make it quick. We have plans tonight." I stayed 20 minutes. Mia showed me a drawing she'd made at school, a house with a sun and 4 stick figures. "That's you, Grandma," she said, pointing to the smallest one, standing slightly apart from the others. I looked at that little figure for a long time. Cole fell asleep on my lap before I could finish reading to him. I laid him down on the couch, tucked the blanket under his chin, and kissed his forehead. Then I picked up my purse, walked back through that kitchen, and said goodbye to a room that barely noticed. Sophia was on her phone. Lorenzo raised 2 fingers without looking down. I sat in my car in their driveway for 10 minutes. Didn't cry. Couldn't. Something past crying had taken over, something older and quieter and a lot more dangerous. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. 62 years old, 3 decades of rain, heat, and Chicago ice. A husband buried, a son raised alone. Every extra shift, every skipped vacation, every dollar I didn't spend on myself because I was spending it on him. And he couldn't give me 20 minutes without making me feel like a problem to be managed. I started the car, and somewhere on that 2-hour drive back to San Antonio, somewhere between the Austin city limits and the long, flat stretch of Texas highway, something inside Lilly Baker stopped being patient. She just didn't know what she was going to do about it yet. If this story hits something in you, you already know why. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. "Nobody wants to hear that story, Mom." Lorenzo said it loud enough for the whole table to hear. I had my fork halfway to my mouth. Sophia didn't even try to hide her smile, just lifted her wine glass and looked away like something interesting was happening outside the window. Mia and Cole stared at their plates. 7 and 5 years old, even they knew something just broke. I set my fork down. The clink of it against the china sounded enormous. I had driven 2 hours for this dinner, brought sweet potato pie, made from scratch, Daniel's mother's recipe, the one Lorenzo used to request every single year without fail. I'd stood in my kitchen at 6 a.m. making it. Sophia's caterers had covered the rest. Everything store-bought, everything perfect, everything that had nothing to do with me. I should have read that as a warning. The table was beautiful, I'll give her that. Linen napkins, candles, a centerpiece that probably cost more than my first car payment. Lorenzo sat at the head like he'd been born there, Sophia beside him, elegant, comfortable, in her house, at her table, in the life my money helped build. I sat at the far end, close enough to be present, far enough to be decoration. The story I was telling wasn't even long, just something about Daniel, how he burned the turkey the first Thanksgiving we were married, how we ended up eating cereal at midnight, laughing so hard we cried. I was telling it to Mia because she'd asked about her grandfather. She asked. A 7-year-old asked. And Lorenzo shut me down in front of her like I was a television he was tired of. "Nobody wants to hear that story, Mom." I waited for him to catch himself, to look at his daughter's face, to remember who he was talking to. He reached for his wine instead. Sophia touched his arm the way you touch someone when you're proud of them. I looked at Mia. She was staring at me with these careful eyes, already learning, already watching how the adults in her life treat people who are no longer useful. I picked up my napkin, folded it once, twice. "Excuse me," I said quietly. "I need some air." Nobody moved. Nobody followed. I sat in my car in their driveway in the dark for a long time. The turkey, the cereal, midnight, and Daniel laughing until he couldn't breathe. He'd been gone 18 years, and Lorenzo just buried him again at the dinner table. I drove home, and when I walked through my apartment door, I went straight to the closet shelf, pulled down the old shoebox I hadn't opened in 2 years. Inside were documents, every single thing I had ever signed my name to. I spread them across the kitchen table one by one and sat down. My hands weren't shaking. That was the part that surprised me. "Johnny, I need you to move the money. All of it. Today." Silence on the other end. "Lilly, today, Johnny." It was 6 a.m., Sunday. The documents were still spread across my kitchen table from the night before. I hadn't slept, didn't try to. I'd spent the whole night reading every page, every signature, every date. 31 years of carrying mail in Chicago winters. Every overtime shift, every holiday I worked so someone else could stay home, every dollar I didn't spend on myself. It was all here, laid out in black and white on my kitchen table in San Antonio. Co-signer on the Austin mortgage, my name. Joint emergency fund, contributions going back 11 years, my money. Sophia's Lexus, registered under my name because Lorenzo's credit wasn't good enough when they bought it. I hadn't forgotten. I'd just been too busy being a mother to use it. Johnny McConnell had been my financial advisor for 9 years. Good man, careful, the kind who asks twice before he moves anything. He asked twice. "Johnny, are you sure about this? That joint fund was funded entirely by me," I said. "Lorenzo contributed twice in 11 years. I have the statements in front of me." Pause. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll process it today." First call done. Gianni Estes picked up on the second ring. I'd used him once before, when Daniel died and I needed the estate sorted fast. He was sharp, didn't waste words. "Gianni, I need 2 things. I need to be removed from a mortgage cosign, and I need my will rewritten." "How fast?" "Yesterday." He didn't flinch. That's why I called him. We talked for 20 minutes. By the end, Lorenzo would need to refinance the Austin house entirely on his own within 30 days, and everything I owned, my pension, my savings, the small piece of land Daniel left me in his name, would go to a scholarship fund for postal workers' children putting themselves through school. Not $1 to Lorenzo Ramsey. He read it back to me twice to make sure. "You're certain?" he asked. I looked at the documents on my table, at Daniel's name on the old insurance papers, at my signature on that mortgage, at 11 years of bank statements showing me depositing and Lorenzo withdrawing. "I've never been more certain of anything," I said. The last call was to the insurance company. Sophia's Lexus, registered in my name. I reported it. The woman on the phone was professional, efficient, unbothered. "A repossession notice will be issued within 24 hours, she said. "Thank you," I said. "Have a good day." By 9 a.m., every call was done. I made coffee, stood at my kitchen window watching the San Antonio Sunday morning wake up slow. A neighbor walking a dog, a kid on a bicycle. Normal life moving at its normal pace. I thought about Lorenzo sitting down to breakfast in Austin right now, Sophia pouring coffee, Mia and Cole eating cereal. Everything perfect, everything fine. They had no idea. That was the part that steadied me. Not anger, not satisfaction, just clarity. The clean feeling of a decision that can't be undone. I went to my bedroom and pulled the small suitcase from the top shelf of my closet. I didn't need much. A few changes of clothes, Daniel's photograph, my postal service retirement papers, Gianni's card, and the shoebox. I was packed in under an hour. I took a last look around my apartment. The coffee mug Daniel bought me at a flea market in 1987. The photograph of Lorenzo at his college graduation, me beside him squinting into the sun, proudest woman alive. I left it on the counter. He could have it. I didn't need reminders of who I used to be. I locked the door, dropped the key in the landlord's mailbox, and drove east toward Savannah without looking back once. "Mom, call me back. This isn't funny." Lorenzo's first voicemail. Monday morning, 7:43 a.m. Calm, annoyed, the voice of a man who still thought this was temporary. I was somewhere in Louisiana when it came through, pulled over at a gas station, bought a black coffee and a bag of peanuts, and listened to it once, then deleted it. Got back in the car. By Tuesday, the tone had changed. Sophia called 4 times before she left a message. "Lilly." Her voice was different now. The polish was gone. "They took my car this morning. They took it right out of the driveway. Mia saw it happen. She was scared. I don't know what you think you're doing, but this has gone far enough. Call us." I almost felt something. Almost. Then I remembered her lifting that wine glass at Thanksgiving while her husband buried me at the dinner table. I deleted it. I want to be honest about something. There was a moment somewhere on the long stretch of I-10 through Mississippi where I pulled over and sat with my hands in my lap and just breathed. Because this wasn't nothing. Lorenzo was my son, the boy who cried on the kitchen floor the night Daniel died, the boy I promised. I sat there for maybe 10 minutes. Then I thought about Mia, her drawing, the house with the sun and 4 stick figures, me, the smallest one, standing slightly apart from the others. A 7-year-old drew what she saw. I pulled back onto the highway. Wednesday brought 6 calls before noon. Lorenzo left 3 voicemails back to back, like he was building a case. First one, "Mom, I know you're upset. I get it, but you're being irrational. Call me so we can talk like adults." Like adults. Second one, "The bank called. Something about the mortgage. Whatever you're doing, stop. You're going to hurt the kids. Think about Mia and Cole." Mia and Cole. The same children he couldn't be bothered to let me read to for more than 20 minutes. Third voicemail, his voice cracked at the edges. "Mom, please, just please call me back." I noticed he never said sorry. Not once. Not in any message. Not for Thanksgiving, not for the kitchen, not for 2 years of slow, invisible erasure. Just fix this, stop this, call me back. Even his apology was a demand. I deleted all 3. Savannah arrived on a Thursday afternoon. I found a small, furnished apartment 2 blocks from the water. First floor, old building, high ceilings and windows that let in more light than I'd had in years. The landlord was a quiet older man named Mr. Beaumont, who showed me the place in 10 minutes flat and asked no personal questions. I paid 3 months up front. He handed me the keys. That was it. No history, no obligation, no one in this city who knew my name or needed anything from me. I stood in the empty living room after he left and listened to the silence. It didn't feel lonely. It felt like the first clean breath after years of breathing someone else's air. By Friday, the calls had reached 55. Raina, my neighbor back in San Antonio, the only person I'd told, sent me a text. "Lorenzo called your landline 6 times. Also pretty sure Sophia drove by your building. Thought you should know." I texted back, "I'm safe. Don't tell them anything." She sent back a single word, good. That evening, I walked 2 blocks to the water and sat on a bench watching the Savannah River move. It was cold, the good kind of cold, the kind that reminds you that you're still here. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Call number 55, Lorenzo. I watched his name light up the screen, watched it ring, watched it stop. The river kept moving. I put the phone back in my pocket and thought about Daniel, about the way he used to say, "Lilly, you give that boy everything, and one day he's going to have to learn what everything costs." I didn't listen then. Lorenzo was learning now. I went back to the apartment, made tea, sat at the small kitchen table by the window. Tomorrow I had an appointment. Gianni had called that afternoon, professional, quick, the way I liked it. "Lilly, the paperwork is ready. There's just one more thing we need to discuss." "What's that?" I asked. A pause. "Lorenzo's attorney contacted my office today. He wasn't just calling anymore. He was fighting back." "Mrs. Baker, your son is prepared to file for undue influence on the estate changes. He's claiming diminished capacity." Gianni's voice was steady. Mine was steadier. "Let him." Diminished capacity. That was Lorenzo's play. His mother, the woman who walked 7 miles of mail route through Chicago blizzards, who raised him alone on a government salary, who read every mortgage document before she signed, who moved 2 states away and dismantled 11 years of financial dependency in 4 phone calls before 9 a.m. on a Sunday, was claiming she didn't know what she was doing? I almost laughed. "What do we have?" I asked Gianni. He didn't hesitate. "Everything." I could hear papers moving on his end. 11 years of bank statements showing your sole contributions to the joint fund, the mortgage cosign documentation, the vehicle registration, your medical records showing full cognitive function at your last checkup 8 months ago, and, he paused, I took the liberty of pulling the voicemails you forwarded me. "And?" "Mrs. Baker, not one of them contains an apology, just demands. A family attorney is going to love that." I sat back in my chair. Outside the Savannah window, a mockingbird was making noise in the oak tree across the street. Loud, unbothered, singing whatever it wanted. I understood that bird completely. "File everything," I said. "And Gianni, make sure the scholarship fund is airtight. That's the part I care about most." "Already done," he said. "The Daniel Thomas Memorial Fund, registered and protected." I closed my eyes for just a second. Daniel. There it is, I thought. There's where it all went. Johnny McConnell called that afternoon with the final account confirmation. Everything liquid was moved, everything in my name only. The joint fund, drained and closed. Lorenzo would open his banking app and find exactly what he'd contributed in 11 years. Twice. 2 deposits in 11 years. He read me the number. It was embarrassing. "He's going to be furious," Johnny said carefully. "He's been furious for 3 days," I said. "Hasn't changed anything yet." Here is what Lorenzo didn't understand about his mother. I was not a woman who acted out of emotion. I was a woman who delivered mail in weather that closed schools, who negotiated with bill collectors at midnight and still packed a hot lunch in the morning, who sat across from doctors delivering bad news and asked the right questions because falling apart wasn't an option. Sophia mistook my casseroles for weakness. Lorenzo mistook my silence for surrender. They confused kindness with leverage. That was their only mistake, but it was the one that cost them everything. 2 weeks after I arrived in Savannah, I found a volunteer position at a community center 4 blocks from my apartment. After-school program. Kids from the neighborhood, 8, 9, 10 years old, needed help with reading. First day I walked in, a little girl named Rosa handed me a book without saying a word and climbed into the chair beside me like we'd been doing this for years. I read to her for 40 minutes. She fell asleep in the chair. I sat there in the quiet of that room and felt something move through my chest so clean and simple I almost didn't recognize it. Peace. Not the peace of problems solved, the peace of finally being somewhere I was wanted. Raina drove down from San Antonio 3 weeks later, showed up at my door with tamales, store-bought, she's never been a cook, and a bottle of wine, and absolutely zero questions. We sat on my small balcony watching the Savannah evening come in slow and warm. She finally said, "You okay?" I thought about it honestly. "I think I'm better than okay," I said. "I think I'm just me again." She nodded like that was enough. It was. Lorenzo's attorney sent a formal letter in week 3. Gianni handled it before I even finished reading it. The undue influence claim had no ground. My medical records were clean. The financial documentation was airtight. The voicemails told their own story. The letter that came back from Gianni's office was 4 pages, long and, apparently, his words, surgical. I never heard from Lorenzo's attorney again. I won't tell you I don't think about Mia and Cole. I think about them every day. The drawing, the stick figures standing apart from the others. I think about Cole falling asleep on my lap with his hand curled around my finger. That part isn't clean. That part doesn't have a neat resolution. I wrote them each a letter, handwritten, sealed, left it with Gianni to be delivered when they turn 18. In Mia's, I told her about her grandfather, Daniel, the burnt turkey, the midnight cereal, the way he laughed. In Cole's, I told him that strength doesn't always look like what people expect it to look like. Sometimes it looks like a woman who drove to Austin with burnt fingers and tamales and loved people who forgot to love her back. And then, one day, quietly, without announcement, she stopped. I still walk every morning. Old habit. 31 years of roots will do you to that. I walk 2 miles through Savannah before the city wakes up, past the old squares, past the oak trees draped in Spanish moss, past the coffee shop that opens at 6 a.m. and knows my order now. Black coffee, no sugar. Some mornings I think about the woman I was in that Austin driveway, sitting in the dark with burnt fingers and a car that still smelled like tamales, waiting for a son who wasn't coming to the window. I don't feel angry when I think about her. I feel grateful because she finally drove away. Lorenzo Ramsey got what he built, a beautiful house he now has to refinance alone, a wife who married a man with a safety net and is now learning what he looks like without one, and a mother who loved him the way Daniel taught her to love, completely, quietly, at enormous personal cost. He called it boring. He called it showing up uninvited. He called it noise. 62 years of Lilly Baker, and that's what he called it. The scholarship fund opened in the spring. First recipient, a 19-year-old girl from the south side of Chicago putting herself through community college while working nights. She wrote me a thank you letter, 3 paragraphs, handwritten. She said she didn't know who Daniel Thomas was, but that whoever he was, he must have been loved by someone remarkable. I folded that letter and put it in my wallet, right next to the photograph from the Lincoln Memorial steps. Both of them mine, both of them real, both of them proof that a life built on love isn't wasted even when the person you built it for forgets to be grateful. You just have to be brave enough to redirect it. Lilly Baker didn't lose her family. She finally found herself. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs permission to finally choose themselves. Like, follow, and stay with us. More stories like this one are coming. End.